Let's see now the female reproductive system. And the main function of the female reproductive system is to produce egg and of course to support pregnancy. The ovaries are the organs responsible for producing the eggs, or producing what we call them the oocytes. And also they are responsible for secreting the hormones, mainly estrogen and progesterone. These hormones are important in overall health of the female body, and also in establishing and maintaining the pregnancy. Ovaries, once they release their oocytes, it will be captured by the oviduct or the fallopian tube, which would take these oocytes to the uterus, and fertilization usually happens in the oviduct, and it takes 3 to 4 days a trip through the oviduct to the uterus. To make sure that we are following what I'm talking about, these are the ovaries, this is the fallopian tube or the oviduct, and as we said, the ovaries are producing the egg. It will be captured by the fallopian tube or the oviduct, and it will be transported to the uterus. Now, the uterus itself is the site for the fetal development. Fetal development, as we know. And it's made out of 3 layers. We have the endometrium, which is the inner layer. Here it supports fertilized egg, and it's part of it will slug off during the menstrual period or the menstrual flow. Then we have the second layer, which is the myometrium. These are smooth muscles. They will expand during pregnancy, and they will contract during labor. And the inner part of the uterus, which is the cervix. This is the narrow opening of the lower part of the uterus that would permit sperms to enter into the uterus, and also it will allow the fetus to exit uterus during birth. Along with these, with the ovaries and the oviduct and the uterus, we have external organs, including the vagina, which is the sixth organ, place for sexual intercourse and the birth canal. And we have also the external genitalia that helps in the sexual process or the sexual intercourse and stimulation of the sex function of the female reproductive system. This is the summary of the component of the female reproductive system, the different structures and their function. Mammary glands are important because they are nourishing the infant. Although they are not part of the reproductive system, but they are playing important role after pregnancy. We're talking about the breasts, and the breasts, they contain the mammary glands, and these are modified sweat glands. The mammary glands are modified sweat glands, and they are considered technically part of the integumentary system. They are specialized for lactation, which is production of milk, and there are several hormones in controlling the prolactation or lactation. We have prolactin. This is a hormone produced by the anterior pituitary gland, would stimulate milk production. And we have also another hormone by the posterior pituitary gland, which is the oxytocin. This will stimulate the contractions that will eject the milk. Now, the female reproductive system physiology is a little bit complicated because there are different things happening at the same time usually. We can put them that there are 2 cycles within the female reproductive system or the female body. These are the menstrual cycle and the uterine cycle. Menstrual cycle is happening in the well, technically both are happening one through the ovary and the other one through the uterus. But again, as I said, both are overlapping and significantly overlapping. The ovarian cycle, it's a series of changes in ovaries associated with oocyte maturation, controlled by FSH and LH. And the uterine cycle, these are changes in the endometrial lining of the uterus, and they are controlled by estrogen and progesterone. So here we are talking about four hormones controlling different things, and again at the same time. Now let's see the ovarian cycle. Maybe it's better to go through the image. We will start with immature follicles. These are small cells. When the baby girl is born, her ovaries are filled with these immature follicles. They are composed of primary oocytes and supporting cells. Later, after adolescence and every month, some of these cells would start to develop, stimulated by the FSH. They will continue developing. They will start to have areas filled with fluid. We are calling them antrum. And they will keep progressing. These cells here, or these follicles, will start to produce estrogen. Then they will develop into a little bit matured follicles. Estrogen increases till ovulation is happening. Ovulation is the release of this oocyte, and this is stimulated by LH. This oocyte now will be captured by the fallopian tube. Now, once the oocyte is released, the follicle itself will regress, and it will form something called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum produces progesterone, and progesterone on the corpus luteum is important in case there is a pregnancy. It will maintain progesterone for the coming 3 months of pregnancy. But if there is no pregnancy, the corpus luteum will degenerate and it will leave a scar in the ovary. So this is the overall steps of the ovarian cycle. The overall steps of the ovarian cycle. And as we say, and as we saw, the whole idea is to produce the oocyte or the egg. Now, if there is a pregnancy, once that fertilized egg established, it will secrete something called the human chorionic gonadotropin, HCG. That is the hormone is detected by the pregnancy tests. HCG, this would cause the corpus luteum to continue producing estrogen and progesterone for another 9 to 10 weeks. After that, the placenta will take place in producing these two hormones. And high levels of estrogen and progesterone prevent ovulation during pregnancy. Now, for the uterine cycle, it prepares the uterus for the pregnancy. And these are series of changes that occur in the endometrium, in the inner layer of the uterus, as it prepares for the possible arrival of a fertilized egg. Here we have different phases. We have the menstrual phase. This is days 1 to 5, in which estrogen and progesterone decreases, endometrial lining degenerate, and there will be the menstruation occurs, or the flow. Then it will be followed by the proliferative phase. These are days 16 to 14. Maybe it's here, it's better. This is the first period. This is the menstrual phase. As we said, this is the phase of degeneration. As you can see, there is low levels of estrogen and progesterone here. Okay, then it will be followed by the proliferative phase. This is from days 5 to 14. In these days, we are seeing a little bit increase in estrogen and a little bit increase in progesterone by the end of day 14. At the same time, At the same time, we have on the ovarian cycle, we have the growth of the follicle. The third phase, or before the third phase actually, we have the ovulation, which will happen directly around like day 14, directly in the middle. The oocyte is released, and we will see a peak in FSH and LH, and this peak of LH and FSH will trigger the ovulation. And once we have ovulation, we would see an increase in the levels of progesterone, and that would mark the secretory phase. With the secretory phase, we have now the corpus luteum is producing progesterone, and the endometrium would continue to proliferate, and also there are more blood vessels, more glands mature, and this layer is very critical now, and its thickness is critical, its level of blood supplies are critical, because it's ready for the fertilized egg. We said that the egg might get fertilized in the oviduct somewhere here, so when it arrives into the uterus is ready for baby development or the fetal development. Now, for these hormones, as we saw, there are cyclic changes of these hormones, and these will lead to the produce of the menstrual cycles. We're talking about pituitary and reproductive structures. We have a positive feedback, which is happening during proliferative phase. Increasing estrogen causes surges in LH, which in turn causes ovulation. And at the same time, there is a negative feedback during the secretory phase. Because of the levels of estrogen and progesterone, they will inhibit the LH and FSH release, and that would inhibit further ovulation during one menstrual cycle. So we have very sophisticated mechanisms of hormones interactions to prevent double ovulation, and at the same time to make sure that there is at least one ovulation, and that the process is as smooth as it should be. The uterus is ready for that fertilized egg. This is the video about the female reproductive system animation that would explain some of the concepts that we talked about. Please watch it. Now, I think for the rest of the slides, there is nothing really I want to explain or to talk about. Please go through them, see some of the diseases. Make it light. We are not going to go into much details about them. Please go through them. Let me know if you have any question. Post your comments, your questions, your videos, ideas, challenging questions into the forum, and we will see this in the lab.